I've been waiting for my hearing.
We're gonna give up these couple more minutes and then first of all,
Awesome.
Thank you for documenting those.
okay, yeah. All right, everybody, we're gonna get going in about 5 minutes. We're gonna let any last minute trail-in people get here, but we'll start at about 3:25. Does that sound good, everybody? Thanks for hanging out. All right, yay! All right, cool. There we go. Okay, get the picture. Is that what's happening? Okay. Let me scooch in here. All right. Okay, thank you.
Hey, you were still coming here from Chastain or from Marietta, so we'll get another 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, then we'll get going.
Yeah, exactly.
Always give everybody a chance. Is everybody going to let them want to run a little over, or does anybody need to leave right here? No, we're good? Okay. See, there they are. Stragglers. Yeah, they are. We waited for you.
American lady.
Oh my God, I didn't know Demerits was like, I didn't get them back then. I had one teacher, the one teacher I'll always remember, like, you know, usually like if you went to the bathroom, you have like a little pass in the class, like, yes, I'm in the class, I have to go to the bathroom, whatever, because it's high school. There was this guy who taught marine biology, and he was way in the back of the school. He hated when people left his class, because they would do it just to kind of, you know, mess around or whatever. He would make you take a wooden oar, like an oar, a wood size, and it was heavy. And you have to drag this thing all the way. Yeah, I was in, what was it, like the honor science class? And so I would tell him, like, come on, Mr. So-and-so, and he's like, nope. Yeah, but you have to take the oar. And I was like, oh, really? You gotta go right to the bathroom. Yeah. The hall monitor might get you. That's a big difference between where I was in high school, probably in Southern California. You didn't have hall monitors, you had actual narcs. They were like on your head. Yeah, there was a lot of drugs and guns and knives and all that unfortunate stuff that went on in the high school. And that was back the 90s, of course, you know. And I know it's funny, they put that over there, and I'm like, someone took wire plugs, cut it whole, and then just go inside and get it up and hold it out. I think back to my high school class and I'm like, wow, that really happened. Oh yeah, no, that's great. I brought it up. I guess we're gonna take a picture, y'all. All right, y'all, we'll take a picture. I'm sorry. All right. Are we ready? I think we're fashionably late. Is that how this goes? We're about 10 minutes late? That's all right though. All right. Thank you guys for being here at the what's the title of the panel exactly?
Animating the future, teaching animation.
Animating the future, teaching animation. So hopefully y'all are in the right place. If you're not, it's okay. The doors are going to stay open. And it's right. You can stop anytime you want. So I'm Sandy Chamberlain, hyphenated Bedford because I got married in April. I'm in the process of changing my last name. It's a lot. So I'll be your moderator today. I'm also a professor here at ASIFA-South State University. I teach with the undergrad students and the graduate students here. Lots of familiar faces in the audience. So thank you guys for being here. And I'm going to pass the mic to one of our first panelists, Colin. And I'm going to have each of you guys do a little introduction so they know who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Cool.
Hi guys, my name is Colin Wheeler, Dr. Colin Wheeler. I got my doctorate in film media and theater at Georgia State. My area of specialty is mostly writing about animation, exploring it on a scholastic level. My favorite thing is taking works that are considered kind of denigrated or below what we would consider artistic quality and finding the merits that I can kind of use to elevate them to something of beauty and worthy of study. Currently, I have 2 chapters coming out, one on Sandman, Dream of a Thousand Cats, that's going to be published in the Philosophy of Sandman. And I've got a chapter on Studio Ghibli adaptations on how Ponyo helps us deal with, how Ponyo helps children learn about and deal with climate change. I'm also working on a stop motion film that's taken me like 2 years right now, so trust me, I still animate, I still practice, you just haven't seen it yet.
Hello, I am Lisa Farrell, and I am a professor of practice at Georgia State University's Creative Media Industries Institute. In addition to that, I am also a partner in an animation firm, Slavic. And our very first project, which we did during COVID, premiered at Tribeca, and I'm very, very proud of that. It was an Afrofuturistic, post-apocalyptic short. And let's see what else. I've been a producer for a very long time. My sweet spot is post-production and visual effects. I was with Giant Studios back in the day when we did Lord of the Rings and Avatar. And I was at Spin, which is an animation house out of Toronto. And currently I am still working. My sweet spot is this. I do not animate, I'm a producer. But I also teach producing courses at the CMII, and what I try to emphasize is that story is king. If you know how to tell a story or understand a story, you know where you fit in the pipeline, and that's what I want, whether you're a gaming student or an animation student or just, not just a film student or a film student, I want you to understand story.
Hi, I'm Pete Paristo. I'm a professor here at Kansas State University, professor of digital animation, and I'm also the coordinator for our graduate MA program here at School.
Aloha guys, I'm Chris Killicoff Malone. I'm a professor of digital animation and illustration here at KSU. I'm also the coordinator of the digital animation department here. I got my undergrad from Virginia Commonwealth University, where I studied kinetic imaging, which is video, sound, and animation. And I got my graduate degree from SCAD in sequential art. So a lot of my work tends to focus more in the pre-production side. And I love doing everything that goes into animation before the animation happens. And I have also spent a lot of time working in the industry simultaneously while teaching, working for shows like Cyanide and Happiness, Baby Shark, right? Yeah, please don't look that up if you're not over 18. And just a lot of other really cool cartoons simultaneously. One of my big focuses is trying to be able to get animation students into the industry as early as possible. So thanks for having me here.
I think Pete and I can probably share this one here, so we're not going to get any reverb or anything.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I have a little bit more background than just a professor here at Kansas State. I got my undergrad out in Cal State Fullerton. It was in entertainment arts with a concentration in animation. I also went to Savannah College of Art and Design down the street here in Atlanta. I have an MFA in illustration and an MA in animation. And in the year 2026, I will have taught at the college and university level for 2 decades. Woo! Thank you. Hopefully I'm qualified to be the moderator, we'll see. But so how this is gonna go is it shows that I have a big chunk to ask my questions, but I feel like you guys will have a lot of questions as well, so I'm gonna taper mine down a little bit, but I'll get it kicked off. And then as you guys have questions, do we have a mic that can go around?
Well, actually, we could probably just use
It'll
this
have to
extra
be
one.
one of those.
Okay, that's fine. Chris, I'm taking your mic away.
But it's,
I know, so
but it's
if we
blue,
were,
right here.
oh, do you want to keep that one?
All right,
Orange
fine.
away? Oh, no.
Color coordination's ruined.
Thanks for sharing is caring,
My
Chris. Well, thank you, Chris. So to get to, start thinking about any questions that y'all might want to ask, raise your hand, and she'll go ahead and come on over, but I'll get it going here. So pathways to teaching animation, which I think is a really good one. I think a lot of you guys would want to know how each of our panelists got into this kind of field and how they found themselves to be professors. So I want you guys to kind of tell us about your journey of becoming an animation professor. How did you learn the ins and outs of getting to this level of teaching? And then also, what are essential certifications and qualifications to teach at university level versus high school level and all that kind of jazz? Cool. All right.
I'm not going to be the only one here to say this, but I've always been into animation. I believe the first cartoon I saw was The Lion King in theaters. I was 5 years old. And I've always been someone who really enjoys studying the text of something, how it was made, how it was written, and expanding the meaning of that into a larger network. I didn't start out in animation necessarily. I was in theater and puppetry and got a degree in theater and comparative literature. Then I got my MFA at SCAD because I realized it was working with animators was just as much fun, if not more so, than working with actors. And there's just something really invigorating about being in a creative team, people working together. My favorite thing about animation is that it's an incredibly subjective form of filmmaking. You're not working with a camera or a mechanical eye, so to speak, and watching an animated film. It gives me a glimpse into how someone sees the world and how they like to render it. As far as credentials go for things that are valuable for teaching, I would say the number one thing is industry experience. It's when you're going on a tour on a school, they're going to ask you, you're going to hear like, oh, this is Professor so-and-so, he worked at this, this industry or whatever. And whoever said those who cannot teach never met animation faculty, because we absolutely have to do and teach at the same time. It's really hard to understand like how important it is that like if you have credentials from DreamWorks or Disney, that's functionally like a doctorate, basically ready to go in. You don't need that much teaching experience. I've seen lots of faculty members get hired on for full-time positions with like no experience in the classroom whatsoever, so that's kind of a skill that you can pick up as you go. And I'd say that, yeah, my advice would be to get like a solid 5-10 years in the industry and then go on for like a full-time position, because if you go on into an adjunct position or a part-time, the UK call them contingent faculty, which I think is a little more honest. You're not going to be able to survive on the contingent faculty what they pay. So you're going to need to have freelance work lined up, which you'll have from your industry work as well. And that's largely how you will survive. It's very much not a case of, oh, finally I got a position at a university, I don't have to sell myself anymore, I don't have to worry about that entrepreneurial spirit. Absolutely not. You absolutely have to keep working in the field and networking and coming to festivals like this and so on. So those are the things I'd say are most important.
I want to piggyback off of something Colin just said, that The Lion King was like his first animated film. I use that to teach in my class because it is a perfect example of the hero's journey using animation, and it's something that my students can relate to. So how I came to teach at Georgia State, well, at the CMII, we have traditional professors, PhD professors. Then we have professors like me, professors of practice, who have spent at least 15 years in the field and are still working. That's me, and one of the great things about that is when I'm working on a project, I can invite my students to be a part of it. One of the things about the student body at Georgia State that may be different from like a SCAD or a Kennesaw State is that at least 80% of our students are on some sort of financial assistance, and they don't have the inroads to the networks that they need to create. That's where I come along, and I make sure that my students also have these same advantages as someone who grew up their whole lives knowing that, you know, what this was and having people who could help them. That's what I do. I tell them you don't have to reinvent the wheel because I did it. It's funny that I never ever thought that I would be a professor. In fact, when our executive director of the CMII, who we've been friends for forever, when he told me that he was leaving the production house he was at to run the CMII, I was like, are you crazy? People like us do not belong in a school because it's such a different environment from what's in a book to what you're actually doing. And I kind of think that's why it's important to have people like who actually have worked to actually teach the students. The other thing, I'm a producer, I'm not an animator, and I think that is one of my superpowers when it comes to teaching, is because I have spent the lifetime of my career explaining to clients what is going on in a way that they can understand. And because sometimes animators, no offense, you talk over people's heads. They don't know what you're saying. They don't understand why this is taking so long. They don't understand why this costs this much. That's where I come in. And so when it comes to teaching my students, I break it down for them the same way I break it down for a client. So that's me.
I got my MFA from Ohio State University, and I worked on a doctorate there as well. And this was, I'll date myself, over 30 years ago, so I'm probably the older statesman here.
You did 30 levels.
Yeah,
like
there,
it.
thank you. Thank you. So
High score. Yeah.
when I was there, it was kind of the birth of really 3D at the time. That's what I really got into. I started at a center called ACAD, Academic Computing for Arts and Design. And it was kind of really the birth of 3D. That's when Toy Story first came out, so I'll really date myself here. My transition, I went into industry. I went into the visualization industry. I did medical visualization. I did accident reconstruction, and then I did some commercial work as well as education visualization as well. I worked in Columbus, and then I went up to Detroit and worked for the Big Three as well. Here in Detroit, we worked for the Big Three no matter what. I transitioned. I've worked for several universities. I've gone around and kind of started programs in animation, so it's really become popular right now. But I was at the beginning where universities were just understanding this new media, and that's how I got involved in it. My knowledge of working in the commercial field, and then also my knowledge of teaching got me involved in it, and then I was attracted to, I started off at East Tennessee State University and started their program down there. And then I went up to Missouri and started a program out there as well. So I've got a background in curriculum development here as well. So it is a combination of working in the industry, but also having that background in teaching and knowing how to communicate that knowledge there.
So I would recommend everybody too that to take a look at the experience that you've already had and see if you have any transferable experience working in whatever job you may have. You'll be really pleasantly surprised with how much that may actually translate into the classroom. For instance, in the 2000s, I did a lot of different conventions for my webcomic. So I would travel all over and I would do panels just like this one right here. And that's really where I got my first taste of teaching, was basically talking to awesome folks like you. And I started to learn that teaching was something that I enjoyed, I thought I was good at it, and it was something I kind of saw a future in as well. So then I started working for an Apple store in Virginia around like 2009. It was really cool. I got a chance to work the iPad launch. That was a lot of fun. But I got a job there teaching. I would teach people how to use the software, how to use the technology. And most importantly, I was actually in charge of all of the onboard training. So I was trained by Apple on how to be able to do customer service as well as train other new employees. And I would say that that was actually the most influential experience in my teaching career because I always refer back to those old handbooks that I probably shouldn't have. Sorry, Apple. But anyways, those taught me how to interact with other people, with students, with customers, and I found my skills from Apple translating super well to the classroom. So for many of you who may have jobs in the animation industry already, think about the times that you have already worked with other employees. Maybe you would have a newbie coming aboard that you had to train them in a new art style. Maybe you were a supervisor for something. Maybe you had to teach somebody else something on the team, and refer to those experiences, and that to me is what I bring mostly into the classroom. As far as the degrees and everything too, I would strongly recommend getting a master's degree or a master's of fine arts because a lot of the full-time positions at universities require a terminal degree, which is the highest degree that you can get in that field. And so full-timers would usually require the MFA. If you want to do like a part-time, like an adjunct position, or for teaching undergrad, or not undergrad, K through 12, usually a master's would do fine with that, but don't go up beyond that.
I can speak more to that.
If you can speak to that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I was just talking to one of our graduate students
Anna Valdez earlier this week about that, because she is looking into, she's getting ready to graduate from our master's program and is looking to become a college professor. So with the MA and grandfathered experience, like Chris said, you can teach as an adjunct. If you are looking, if you get bit by the teaching bug out there doing whatever you're doing, and you're like, wow, this really might be for me, then I would say definitely pursue that MFA, because that is going to be that terminal degree that you will need to be taken seriously and to walk into academia and be able to write curriculum and do the fun things that are going to actually really make a difference within the programs, okay? If you are like, hey, I like K through 12th grade, usually with animation and things like this, and you know, the more advanced arts, it's going to be about middle school to high school. I know that Roswell High School here in Georgia has a Cintiq lab, and they do, yeah, they do animation and everything. I've been, one of our professors, Matt Phillips, teaches there. I've been out a couple times, it's very fun. In order to teach at a high school or a middle school, you actually do not need to have a master's. It is advisable, it's always nice to have, but if you have your Bachelor of Fine Arts or a Bachelor of Arts in animation or illustration, something like this, you can take what is called the GACE test. It's G-A-C-E. And there is a lot, if you just look up GACE, Georgia, it will bring you up to the website. It gives you a ton of resources. It's sort of like taking an SAT for arts. But if everybody in here can draw a barn or something simple in perspective, you'll pass the drawing portion of this. And then a lot of it is color theory and some simple English and math that I do believe everybody in this room would be able to do, but they have test preparation documentation that you can have, and the tests are taken on a revolving basis, so you find where a test is going to be held. It's, you know, a timed test and a moderated test. You would have to go down to a testing center and take one, but everything you need to know is going to be on those websites, so GACE for that one, okay?
I never knew that, it's good to know.
Yeah, thanks, yeah, no problem, hold on. Oh, I gotta open up the phone, hold on. I had a good question. I think what we'll do is, I'll maybe ask 2 more questions, and then we'll move on to y'all's questions. Does that sound good? Yeah, okay. All right, I'm kind of loud, but I'll still use the mic, so I don't sound like I'm yelling at everyone. All right, so our industry in animation is changing all the time. How do y'all prepare your students, and how can educators support students in building their portfolios and preparing for careers in an animation industry that is ever changing?
This is something that I've started to understand as I've been teaching animation history, and the history of animation in comic books is that there have been a series of upheavals in the industry for at least 100 years, right? I mean, when Snow White came out, there was this huge push towards, can we make feature-length films that are volumetric and enchanting, and of course Fleischer Studios did things like Gulliver's Travels and fell on their face. We've had like constant upheavals in terms of technology and different ways in which things have been outsourced or automated, and we're certainly seeing that nowadays with, I don't know if anybody reads Cartoon Brew, but a recent article suggested that about 200,000 positions in the creative industries are going to be lost in the next 3 years. So we've got certainly a lot of positions that will be disappearing and a certain number of new positions opening based on where you can position yourself. But what I do want to emphasize is that the industry is big. It's very big. And there are lots of weird little niches that you can fill that you didn't really even know technically existed. You can be doing training videos, you can be doing AR, VR, you could be working at like little boutiques or apps or everything like that. So the industry is incredibly diverse, and you will probably find some position out there that will speak to your skill set.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback again on what Colin said. We're always changing. So, which is one of the main reasons I like to emphasize things like story, because once you can learn software, you can learn the latest gadgets, but you need to know the fundamentals, or you're no more than, forgive me, a button pusher if you don't know why this is done and, or where this came from. So the history of animation, to me, that is like a great thing to teach. It alleviates the stress that, oh my God, things are changing, because you see they're always changing. But it also allows you to speak in like a shorthand with each other. And I know that a lot of people are worried about AI coming through and taking jobs, this, that, and the other. But it can never take the place of human emotion. It doesn't understand it the way that we do. I personally see AI as a way of making shortcuts to the grunt work that humans don't need to do, and allowing you to concentrate and make even more wonderful and beautiful stories because you've got somebody else cleaning up the trash.
I think one of the reasons you go to college is you try to learn how to learn. Technology is always changing. It's always changed out through the industry as you look through the history. But you're going to school to learn how to learn, and so you can facilitate that. So you can learn the new technology, how to use it in your workflow, what's good, what's bad. There's always software that's changing. There's always new methods, you know. But the animation is always going to be there, and that workflow is going to be there. Maybe the process will change a little bit, you know. I think it's actually becoming more and more easier for an individual to be able to produce. It's always been a team environment, and it still is, but the tools are getting easier, so you as an individual can do more. I think that expectation's out there as well.
I would always recommend trying to keep your pulse on the animation community pretty much up to check. Try to be able to always be up to date with all of your contacts that you still have in the industry, whether you're actively working in it or not. An example that I have is actually right when I first started working here at KSU, I met up with a lot of folks from Floyd County Productions. And I'm pretty sure that everyone in the industry has one thing or some opinion of what needs to be taught in the classroom that they currently think is not being taught. And when I was hanging out with this group, everybody had an opinion of what should be taught in the classroom. That's awesome, I'd love to hear that. But one thing got repeated, and it got repeated very often. And that was all of the other schools in the area were producing students who could not draw in the studio's style. They could draw their own style, they could draw their professor's style, but they were not able to draw in a studio style. And that bit of feedback got repeated to me very often that night. And I identified it as an opportunity to introduce to the KSU program that we have here. And then following that, I would always try to be able to think about what are the trends, what are the needs of the industry, where I started hearing a couple of years ago that there were a lot of students being produced, or students coming out of all of the schools, not just ours, but all of the schools in the Georgia area, that were very much solo animators, where they could work in a team, but they weren't great at it just yet. And so again, I saw that as an opportunity of, hey, let's try to improve some of the teamwork here. Perspective was another issue, where a lot of students were relying on perspective tools in Procreate, in Clip Studio, all these different programs that would do perspective for them, and so they didn't know what they were working with. So I would just recommend try to talk to your contacts, see what these opportunities are, and implement them, so that way when your students are applying for work, they will be, they'll be meeting a need of the industry. So that's my take.
Thanks, everyone. From just one last thought to kind of continue the thought on, I really love Professor Haristo's, you go to school to learn how to learn. That's such a nice way of saying it. But everybody in this room has hopefully has a good solid background of what it is to be an animator and to work in the industry. The foundational things, like Professor Malone was saying, perspective drawing, things like this. those are constants, they're not gonna change. The software's gonna change, and I tell my students all the time, don't let it intimidate you, it's just a really fancy brush. That's all it is. And if you can do this other stuff, and you can do it well, it's just software. Just pick it up and start running with it, it's no big deal. So I think we're about that time where we should let audience members take some questions. So does anybody in the audience have a question for our panel? All right, everybody here, so we'll move this way. All right.
Hey y'all, my name is Solomon Thorpe. I recently graduated from SCAD this past spring. And so my question for y'all were there any particular sources that y'all use to stay updated on animation news in general? Or what's going on in the industry? I know you all have connections to the industry, but just for folks coming out of college, like straight out, what are some sources that we can look to stay updated on that aspect?
Join ASIFA.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if you're in the Atlanta area and in the Atlanta metro area and you can be here and be participating, especially those of you who want to get into teaching, contact ASIFA and say, hey, I want to do a workshop. Great, thanks for volunteering. Come on down and let's figure it out. But I know Colin's going to have a wealth of websites and things like Cartoon Brew.
Yeah, sure. Cartoon Brew is an example of it.
All those things.
Yeah, animation studies. .blogspot.com has a lot of great scholastic work as well. But yeah, really going to festivals like this one is your best bet. I'd say ASIFA is really good. The Pop Culture Association has had some solid panels, things like that. Society of Animation Studies. I'm sure I'll think of more. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards if you want some more. Yeah.
But yeah, and places like ASIFA-South will have,
So the places like ASIFA-South and groups like that will essentially have folks from all over the industry come together. You're going to have 2D animators, 3D animators, comic book artists. You're going to have KSU students, SCAD students. There are representatives and directors from
Georgia State students.
Georgia State students, thank you. My apologies.
Get Lisa.
So you're going to be having folks from all over the industry, all over academia coming here, and I don't think that there's no better way to be able to hear about what's actually going on than from the direct source. So this is a great place for that.
Okay, thank you.
I have other ones.
Please, go for it.
So really quick, I have a tab on inspiration that if I have any kind of downtime in the classroom or just whenever I'm bored. So like Colin said, Cartoon Brew, Animation World Network, ASIFA Hollywood has the main archive of all the animation stuff nationwide for America. They're really good to look at. If you're looking to be a background artist, animationbackgroundblogspot.com. I know it sounds like a really weird title, but if you just look up Animation Background Blogspot, a gentleman from the industry, I forget his name, it's passed me by, but he's gone into all the archives at like Universals and Warners and Disney's and taken those matte paintings, high-res, scanned all of them and put them up onto this website for you to look at. So if you're into layout and background design, I would definitely check that website out. And then I would also check out other art magazines and websites. Like I look at Juxtapose and Colossal all the time. So there's a lot of stuff out there that includes animation in the kind of highbrow, museum type art arena, not just the lowbrow stuff. So yeah, just do some research and you'll find a myriad of things that you can be connecting to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Griffin, and I'm an animation historian. And Professor Farrell and Professor Dr. Wheeler sort of alluded to this a little bit before, but I'd like to ask everybody, is when we're teaching animation, I think it's very important to talk about, of course, the intricacies of the technology or squash and stretch, whatever you want. But I also think it's very important to discuss the history of animation and be able to have the shorthand, as the professor mentioned, of people like Caroline Leaf or John Hubley or anybody of the sort. And when I meet a lot of students who work in animation, well, I'm sure they'll know who Miyazaki or Chuck Jones is. It's sort of that deeper level where I feel the disconnect is. And I wonder if any of you would speak on that or maybe speak to the importance of knowing figures in the history of animation.
Go for it.
I want to say something. We have someone in the room right now who has started an animation museum.
Well, Griffin ought to talk about it.
So,
I know that guy.
so when we're talking the history of animation, Atlanta is a really great place to be. And I got this from Mr. Speed Schwartz, is that, you know, on William Street, Turner was like the beginning with the 24-hour news cycle and with the graphics. And so like everybody comes from William Street, Floyd County, Cartoon Network, Awesome Inc., everyone. In my opinion, if we really want our animation to be deep and to be meaningful and to be thought of as more than just a children's medium, we need to study the history and build upon that. And also, there's something else, y'all have to forgive me, my mind is scattered. When it comes to like animation and studying its history, it's one of my sweet spots is like bringing like the world together, how we can understand each other's differences. So it's not just like the history of animation here in the States, but like look at like anime and the love of like the coming together of like hip hop culture and Asian Wu-Tang culture. All of this, it makes us more of an international group. So yes, I think that studying the history of animation is a way for us to make the world, I hate to sound so hippie-ish, but it's important to me, to make us understand each other better.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that a lot of people know a fair bit about animation in the United States and probably Japan, but we take for granted that animation is an incredibly international craft. You know, Turkey has a long history with animation. Estonia, UK, Egypt, and like I'm always in my production classes just putting up random cartoons, and my students will be like, who did that? And we're like, oh, you know, Hans Fischer Kozen, and I can go into the history of animation during Nazi Germany or whatever. And what's amazing about it, like I said, animation is an incredibly subjective form of filmmaking, and you get to see not just the artist's perspective, but also the pressure they're under to find their own vision and a vision that represents their country and their way of differentiating themselves from the generic Disney globalist model that kind of pervades the world. And so it gives us an opportunity not just to learn about animation, but about all of these different people from across the world and how they saw the world and crafted a vision particular to them.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. Anything to add?
I don't really have too much more to add to it because you did a great job covering it, but I would kind of argue that in the same way that I like to teach my students the 12 principles of animation, the very foundations of working in animation, I love showing them just like a lot of the earlier cartoons as well. One of my personal absolute favorites is Journey, and I know Journey the Dinosaur, and I always love I always love just kind of reading everything out loud from that side of the film, and that's always just been a personal favorite of mine to show. So I love showing a lot of the old classic cartoons and using that as just another foundation I'm teaching to my students.
It's always interesting to relate the history of animation and actually people who've been in it, so students can see that they're not alone in their struggles, that there has been other struggles out there as well. And you can learn quite a bit from those struggles and how did they handle it, you know. Disney just wasn't Disney all of a sudden, you know. He struggled and he lost his first character, right? No, and I think students need to understand that it's not always an easy road. Not everyone throughout history has had these struggles that they've had to go through. And it's also nice to understand that there's, like everyone else has said here, other cultures are involved in animation, and it's maybe has a different message than what we have here. It's not always commercial as much as it is here. So to understand that as well. So I think that's very important for students to do have a broader sense of what the media is.
I'd like to say one more thing about that too. This is probably the comic graduate student to be talking here as well, but I also love teaching other forms of cartoon history in the classroom as well, specifically about like the earlier days of newspaper comics. And one of my favorite things to talk about is the comic book code that happened in the 50s, where where like a lot of comics would have to be published in a way where like the good guy would always win. You would have you wouldn't have Lex Luthor trying to destroy the world. You would have him stealing 40 pies, and that's just awful. Anyone gets the meme there. And a lot of that influenced comic books, and since a lot of cartoons from that era were coming from comic books, I think that led to a lot of the just this whole idea that cartoons are for kids. And it's from, and I think that the comic book code has a lot into that as well. So I like to teach more than just the animation history. Teach cartoon history, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to add something to that, yeah. And that's something else too that I think censorship is so fascinating because we think of it as something that is intrinsically restrictive or limiting, but it's also generative, right? I mean, the Hays Code, for example, forced filmmakers to become masters of innuendo.
And Zap Comics came out in the early 60s because of that whole conflict.
And Mad Magazine.
Mad Magazine, don't forget Mad Magazine, which was a magazine, not a comic, so they could get away with a whole lot more because of that little difference in terminology. But what else is also great about teaching international animation is that you get to look at studios that were not operating under the commercial incentive of making a whole lot of cash, like Soyuz Multfilm in Russia, for example, much more focused on films that were educational or valuable towards the political messaging at the time. So I think everyone here is familiar with the kind of commercial restrictions that come about with like, I have an idea for a film, but it's not gonna make any money, right? But there were all of these other countries that were operating under other restrictions where like, it's not gonna make any money and that's fine, but you better not say anything bad about the czar, or whatever. Yeah. So we get to experience a lot of different creative limitations that were always there, but these limitations were also generative.
There's also a wider range of where your art can be appreciated as well. You know, I mean, here we talk about it having to be commercial here, but there's avenues outside of here that might appreciate your art a little bit more, your animation as well. You have to find that audience there. So don't hold back on what you want to do there. You just need to find that audience. And the world is smaller now because of all the technology now. 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was harder. I think technology has made us a little smaller. We can see a lot more, and you can get your work out there as well. So appreciate you.
Thank you.
Other questions out there in the audience? Okay, right here, and then I think Solomon.
Hi, my name is Ariel, and I'm a storyboard artist who has a master's degree. And in the past, I've worked with children, like doing art. But I was curious, like on a college level, whenever like you're teaching college students their curriculum, and you're like building your own curriculum, since y'all mentioned that, how do you like kind of start that, or like how do you like make something that will make sure that your students are successful?
Yeah, there's definitely a balancing act, trying to come up with projects that are open enough that will allow them to express their creativity, tell their own stories. but also provide them the skills they need for the industry. And that's the dialectic that we're always working with here, is that they have to have the skills necessary to find a career, but also enough wiggle room to find that self-expression. So I kind of structure my storyboarding class where the first 3 assignments are kind of creative, like they're working from screenplays that already exist, they're making things that are kind of limited like commercials, and only towards the last 2 projects do they get to really come up with their own projects and put everything together. So there's kind of a scaffolding of skill that you have to earn before you get the opportunity to tell your own story. But once you do, you've already unlocked so many skills that your ability to express yourself is that much greater.
I'll come at this from a different way because I'm also the internship director for the CMII. So when it comes to them building portfolio pieces that will help them get work, I'm putting them in touch with real world projects so that they can build portfolio pieces, and I'm also teaching them, always ask, can I show this? Can I take a piece of this for my portfolio, for my marketing materials? Because it's more than just knowing how to create the projects, it's knowing how to actually be an entrepreneur running your own career. So I've seen students who I know have worked on numerous projects because we're also a revenue generating facility, so real world people come in and students work with them on projects. But they never ask, can I show this? Can I use this for my portfolio? So that's, I'm trying to teach them how to take care of themselves also.
One of my favorite things to teach to help students find success post-graduation is I actually have them invoice me. I will actually, and I will give them, I will talk to them about what goes into making a living off of art. I'll even cover taxes with them as well too. I need to do more of the tax stuff here, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to basically have them realize how much time are they actually spending on this cartoon, how much are they making off of it, and is that doable? And so with their final project, they will submit to me an invoice, and I tell them, like, I don't really care what you charge me, just be accurate about how much time you're actually spending here. And I found that that's been very helpful with my students when it comes to time management on their end. Oh, please feel free to steal it. So I've been wanting to make little like fake Monopoly money, like Chris bucks, if you will, so I can actually hand people like fake currency.
I love it.
But yeah, give that a shot.
I will.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I just pulled, since Chris was talking about invoices, I just pulled up, this is the, it has a really long name, the Graphic Artist Guild Handbook. It's the 16th edition. It comes out every 5 years. It has sample invoices, it has sample contracts. It has everything from web design to illustration to animation, everything how you price things. So when you're freelancing and working for clients, you'd say, this is right out of the ethical pricing guidebook, and sorry, I can't be charged any less. So this is, there's a wealth of resources here. And then kind of to piggyback and come back to the storyboarding question, when I teach storyboarding for animation, I make sure to include, like Colin was saying, for like commercials and advertising and live action. So they're not just learning how to animate, how to storyboard for animation, because there is key differences to all of the industries there. Okay. And Solomon, I think had a question. Yeah, here you can just.
Oh, thank you.
I'll pass this one. I'm right here.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question in general was, as being animators, were there any niche aspects of like your career that you went into where you wouldn't necessarily expect animation to show up, but at one point, it just so happened to show up? Like, for example, I've showed my effects reel to some people, and they mentioned how they like to have visuals like that over EDM, like in raves and stuff like that. And I didn't really expect animation to sort of go in that pathway, but that was kind of one of those niche pathways that I personally, didn't expect. So I'm curious if y'all had any similar things.
I've got a funny story to tell about that.
All right, there we go.
I used to work at a studio, Spin Visual Effects, and we did everything, feature, series. So we had this client, it was one of these nasty children's pizza places, like CC Pizza.
Wait a minute.
Sorry. So our job was to make it look gooier and cheesier, blah, blah, blah. So the Inferno artist that I worked with, whom I adore, he's sitting in there, and there's always a television playing in his office. And so we did this spot a couple of weeks go by, the TV's on, and our commercial pops up. And so he looks at it, he was like, that pizza looks really good. And I start laughing, because I'm like, that's a joke. He's like, his own work. Next day he comes in, he's like, I stopped at that place, and I got that pizza, and it's and I was like, you really don't remember that you made it cheesier, or that you colored the pepperoni? So, yeah.
Oh man, I can taste that pizza, unfortunately. So yeah, I would always recommend to keep some business cards on you, because you're never going to know when you're going to meet the right person for a job. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of students who come into animation school is they just think of the name brand studios. I'm going to go work for Disney. I'm going to go work for Pixar. I'm going to go work for Adult Swim. And to them, there's nothing else except for the top of the top. And I found most of my work through the smaller studios. I found most of my work through groups that are not even animation studios. So I always keep my business cards on me, and I've met a wide range of awesome people through things such as Pokemon Go, for instance. It's one of my favorite stories to share. In case you guys aren't familiar with Pokemon Go, you can wait outside of a certain area to do raids inside of the game. I was waiting at a bar once, just like, waiting to play. And I was just doodling in my sketchbook, and the guy who was sitting next to me worked for a graphic design company downtown. They didn't have any animators, and they needed a storyboard job done. I gave him my business card, I did some storyboards for him, and I got paid. It was awesome. Getting paid is always awesome. And then there was another time where my friend and I, we were playing Pokemon Go again. I'm kind of addicted to that game. But we were riding on the streetcar in downtown Atlanta. And it turned out that half of that streetcar were animators. And we didn't know that. Actually, it was really funny. One of them, I'd been working with freelance. I had no idea what this guy even looked like in person. And here he was riding the same streetcar as me playing Pokemon Go. So that's kind of fun. And long story short, you're never going to know when these skills are going to become in place. So always be prepared to promote yourself. And I see a lot of my students from my senior wheel course in the audience here. Did you guys bring your business cards today? There you go. Awesome. That's how you do it. You've got to always be prepared to jump on these opportunities.
I've done a lot of weird stuff, like weird animation stuff. I'm just saying. I worked on the Cabbage Patch Kids app, and I kept coming back with the character designs, like these characters look weird and ugly, and the guy's like, no, that's what they look like. I've done internal training videos for Home Depot and Delta. There would be videos on how to fly an airplane, and I would have the little arrow come down and the lower third come up of hold this at a 45-degree angle or you'll crash.
That's a lot of pressure.
And with the invention of AR, really anything can be animated. I've been designing augmented reality book covers for vanity presses. So you look at it through your app, and then the book cover pops up and does something cool. A friend of mine got a tattoo, and I did an AR thing with that, where his dragon will come off of his arm and breathe fire. You can do so many weird things. Don't limit yourself to film and television alone. There's a million little niches out there that you can film.
So we got going late and we're ending late, but I think we have time for one last question if there's a question out there in the audience. Cricket. Oh, there we go. Last question of the day.
Hello, I go by Sam. I'm actually a computer science graduate from Georgia State. And actually, I'm curious to know is, having a degree in like art, like whether it be a bachelor's or a master's or maybe just even a minor, if you don't have any of that, do you still have a shot in animation?
Yeah. Like I said, working in the more studios you work with, the more reputation and experience you accrue. If you want to teach at the university level, yeah, having a terminal degree is kind of important. It's going to be on pretty much every job search. But barring, if you're not married to the idea of higher education, there are definitely ways to get around the fact that you don't necessarily have the formal education credentials, but if you're associated with a sufficiently large studio, or if you've held a position as a lead or a director or any kind of leadership position, all of that counts for a lot.
As Chris said earlier, skills are transferable. I mean, my undergrad's in broadcast news and my master's is in communications. The skills are transferable, so, but when hiring a lot, right now I'm on a faculty search committee we're getting ready to hire another gaming lecturer. But we're looking, well, not we, I am looking more at what have they done that doesn't have to specifically be around like gaming or animation. What have they done that shows that they know how to communicate? What have they done that shows that they know how to fit in with our student body culture? All of that stuff, because graduating from college with a degree in something and where you end up, they're not always the same things anyway. You gain a lot of other knowledge along the way. So, as you said, no.
Portfolio. You know, that's something, I mean, as all of us are instructors here, I mean, that's something that you try to embed into everyone. I mean, it's always about your portfolio. Degree communicates to everyone that you can stay with it, that you've had formal training there, but your portfolio will speak to that as well. For education, you need a terminal degree for upper level teaching, right? But everything else, we're in the visual field, so it is about visually providing evidence that you can do this. So you can get a job in industry without a degree from college, you know. And here I am, I'm a graduate coordinator, and I'm supposed to be pushing this forward, right? But you know, that's honesty. You know, it's about your portfolio. You'll have a formal training if you go to college. You'll be you have to get things done if you go to college. You know, do you have that discipline? If you don't, that's up to you. You know, you need that discipline. You learn that discipline here in college as well. You know, you learn how to multitask, right, here in college as well. You know, and you learn to be broader in your culture. You know, and accepting and different things. But it is always about your portfolio. Portfolio. Every day you should be thinking portfolio. Whether it's a commercial type of piece that you're producing or whether it's a personal piece that's not so commercially driven, you know, but it's portfolio, you know. Portfolio.
I couldn't agree more with that statement. The only job in my entire career that has ever asked me for my GPA was my role here at KSU. I could have all A's and a crappy portfolio and a studio wouldn't want to hire me based off the grades. I could have an all C average, but like a really killer portfolio. Maybe I just didn't like waking up in the mornings, I don't know. But they're not gonna care about that. They're gonna care more about what I can do for them, and that's demonstrated in the portfolio. And one thing I always like to recommend to all of my students with their portfolios upon graduation is that the day that they get their degree, they're no longer a student, they are now a professional. And as a professional, their entire portfolio is full of student work. And so I always give them the challenge of do not show up at my door asking for help with getting a job until you have actually worked to replace everything in your student portfolio with professional work, whether it's paid or not. So that's kind of my little rule.
I want to piggyback off of what Chris just said about no one's asked about GPA. I always tell my students that I'm a producer playing at being a professor because that's what I've been doing forever. So the way I run my class, the grades come from, they have to come up with a topic that they want to create story around, whether that be build a game, write a song, whatever it is. And that's a grade, then there's a treatment, and then the final pitch documents, which may be storyboards, which may be a series bible, whatever it is. So I have other students who are so accustomed to like school that they're like, well, can we make up our grade with quizzes? Or can I write a paper? I'm like, first of all, I don't want to read a paper.
Thank you for saying it.
Yes, I've never hired anybody on their quizzes.
I'll read your paper. If anybody wants to write an animation, send it to me. I will workshop it with you. I love that stuff.
One other thing that I'll say about that is, and this goes for everybody in the room, I think that having a strong resume and showing that you're connected to your community, whether it's artistic or just kind of helping out, volunteering speaks volumes on a resume. So if I have resumes and I'm looking to hire somebody and the skill level is kind of equal, I'm always going to want to talk to the person that volunteers first. And it's not just me, I've been in places where I've seen people get hired because they have one extra thing on their resume that's like that. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there as well.
It demonstrates a passion for animation.
Yes.
Because when you're working in the field, like sometimes you don't want to work with somebody who is really, really good but a jerk. You want to work with people that you want to be able to work with.
Yeah.
So if you're passionate about animation, passionate about helping, it's a great resume piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And then don't feel afraid to put what I call them whatever jobs. They're the jobs that pay the bills. But those whatever jobs that are listed on your resume show that you're doing something, you're showing up. What are you doing with your time? You're volunteering, you're working on your personal work. That's the kind of person that I want to get to know and that I think is going to be a valuable asset to the team, whether it's teaching or at a studio or on a personal project.
I totally agree. When I was at Spin, I remember this student, a SCAD student came in because we were right down the street. And on her resume, I saw that she had worked at like Burger King and she had started like this like delivery service with her sister. And she was like, sorry, I don't have a lot of like real world experience. And I was like, well, you came to me to get that. What you've just shown me is that you know how to show up to work. You know how to work with someone. You know how to follow direction. That's what you showed me by this. So don't poo-poo on those jobs. There's nothing worse as a producer as having like a great talent who is a real ass to everybody and turns in this stuff when he gets ready to, or tells you that he's an artist and it's gonna take him time. Y'all, no.
Thank you.
And just keep making art all the time. Even if you're doing a job that doesn't mean anything to you, even if there's a huge gap in your resume, I was addicted to heroin and I went to rehab.
Whoa.
Here's a documentary that I made in my spare time. Like, just do it. Just make your life into art.
You'd be amazed how much art has been made off of things like that.
That's very true. If you want to be traumatized, just go watch Trainspotting. I never wanted to touch a hard drug after seeing that movie. It's just horrible. It's really good. You know, yeah, I know. Yeah, oh gosh. All right. So I think that's it. It's about 4:30. All right, guys. Well, thanks everyone. Let's give them a hand. Success in anything that you try to do, but just showing up today shows me that everybody in this room is ready to go. So get out there and be positive and productive. Thank you. Thank you, honey.
Solomon, I actually had one thing for you about the resources earlier. One of the things I will require, I will basically have
You've been doing amazing.
about the facial imaging reader. I know that guy. I don't think it's about the 50 weeks of that work. I said, I know that guy. 5 different people. And what they